Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. My name's Sarah and I make stuff. Today we will be making a beveled glass and crystal sun catcher that you can hang in your window, and if that window gets direct sun, it'll shoot little rainbows all over your house. Super pretty. As I've mentioned before, I am a stained glass artist, and so this project utilizes a lot of the aspects of stained glass without actually having to break any glass. So it is easier than stained glass, but still on the more complicated side. It also requires a couple of special tools, the biggest one being a soldering iron, which you can get really cheap on Amazon. My favorite DIYs are the ones that are pretty easy to make, but then end up looking really impressive at the end. And I think this is one of them. I also really like to give these as gifts. So, good gift idea. Let me go over the supplies you will need for this project real quick. So the first thing you'll need is, things. So in glass making, stained glass, there's this thing called beveled glass. So this is a bevel. As you can see, it's just a glass diamond, but it has a lot of angles on it. It's not just a flat piece of glass. And it reflects light really, really beautifully. Ooh. And when the sun hits it, they're super pretty. I have two sizes here. I have this diamond and I also have this little star shape. I got these on Etsy and I will link the shop. I got them below. They're pretty cheap. They come in packs of like 4 or 10. You are not limited to these shapes. There are endless shapes. There are rectangles, there are bigger diamonds, there are different triangles and circles and stars and moons and all sorts of pretty things. So feel free to get creative with it if you're feeling it. I also bought this little crystal prism. I will also link the shop I got these from. These are a little bit different because since they're prisms, they're gonna reflect a lot more light than the bevels. And when the sun hits them, you're gonna get that little rainbow speckle effect that I love so much. The next thing you'll need is copper foil. I am using my silver-backed copper foil. So when you unstick it from the paper, it's silver. Typically in stained glass, I use copper-backed copper foil. There's black back copper foil, there's different sizes. This is 7/32 silver back copper foil. You can get it on Amazon, you can get it at Hobby Lobby. I don't really shop at Hobby Lobby. You can also get it, the Etsy shop where I bought my bevels sells copper tape. So if you're ordering something from there, you can just order copper tape from them. I also have this, it's called a burnisher. I just use the edge of it to really press down my foil to the glass. You don't need one of these if you're not really going to be doing a lot of stained glass. You can use like the end of a pencil without the lead. You can use like a butter knife, you can use your hand. I've seen a lot of people just use like a chunk of wood. So yeah. You will also need chain. I just have this really thin chain I got from Michael's for a few bucks, and I also have a bunch of different sizes of jump rings. I get these from Amazon. It has every size jump ring. I'm missing a couple because I ran out. I think this is like $6 to $10 and has lasted me like months with all the different sizes. You will also need a variety of little tools to open your jump rings, manipulate your chain, and hook everything together. So I have 2 pairs of pliers, one that's heavy duty, one that has kind of a needle nose, and I also have a little wire cutter that I use for cutting my chain. If you're using really soft chain like I am, could just use scissors. I'm not gonna mess up my scissors with it though, so. For the soldering portion of this project, you will need Flux. I have this big bottle of gel Flux. This stuff is kind of gross, so be careful not to get it on your hands. I do wear gloves when I solder, so when I drop my camera down and show you how to do this, I will have my pink gloves on. If you're careful and, are not doing a lot of it, it doesn't really matter as long as you wash your hands afterwards. You will also need solder. This is the solder I use. It has lead in it. So you're not going to want to make jewelry out of it or eat it or, put it anywhere where a kid might get to it. but this is the best kind for stained glass, so that's what I have on hand. I also have used lead-free solder in my previous video. It's more expensive and it doesn't flow as easily as this solder, but you can definitely use it if you're against lead. I also have a little pair of tweezers for holding my jump rings in place. If you have a pair of pliers, you can definitely use those, but these already have flux on them, so I'm just going to use them. The second to last thing you'll need is your soldering iron. This is mine. It has this big base that has a temperature control. The cheaper ones will have either no temperature control, or it'll have it somewhere like on here or on the wire. I will always suggest that you get a soldering iron that has a temperature control, so you can control the temperature. I also have a stand with a sponge, so if this thing starts to smoke, I can just wipe it off and clean it, and I don't have to set my 700 degree soldering iron down on anything that it might burn. My last item is very important. If you watched any of my other soldering videos, you know that I am a huge advocate for eyewear. I have giant eyeballs. Things tend to direct themselves towards my giant eyeballs. So please wear eye protection when you solder. Flux has a tendency to boil and pop, and every once in a while it'll pop a little piece of solder out and it will hit you. Hopefully not in the eye, because you will be wearing eye protection. So let me drop my camera down and I will show you how to make the sun catcher. The first thing we're going to do is foil our bevels. Oh, I also forgot to mention you might need a little pair of scissors for your foil. So you're going to take your foil and you're going to take the sticky end, and I like to just rest it against my finger like that. You're going to take your bevel. If you've been handling these a lot, you might want to go wash them with dish soap just to make sure the edges are really clean so your tape will stick. And I like to start, where are we? Right at like the edge, and make sure you get it right in the middle. And then for things like this that have straight edges, I'll get out some foil and I'll lay it down, and I will just center it and press. So now one side of my little diamond has foil, and then I'll kind of rotate it and stick down my next side. So now half of our diamond has foil on it. Rotate. I like to keep tension on it, just so there aren't like any gaps or air bubbles in my foil. Turn and press, and last one, turn and press again. So I get to the edge, I will snip it. I will snip 1/2 to 1/4 inch longer than I need to, so it overlaps a little bit. So there you have your foil, and you should have overlap on both sides. So it'll be wider than the edge of the bevel. And then you're just gonna go around the edge, make sure it's stuck down, and sort of pinch it. So those overlapping edge sort of sandwich the glass between them. Now go around. Boop, boop, boop. And the point where you overlapped might be hard for you to press down. So there is our beveled diamond with copper foil. And you're gonna take your burnisher, and I do the outside edges first. You're just gonna rub them so they're really, really stuck to your glass. And then I'll go around the outside. And your foil will look very different after you press it down. It'll look way smoother. So any wrinkle, it's okay if there are some wrinkles, but any wrinkles and lumps should be mostly smoothed out. And you can see that that copper foil is really smooth and nicely on there. Something else I like to do is I'll look at it and see if there's a lot of overlap. Like if I'm looking through it, if I can see a lot of the foil on the other side, you want to get it like dead center so it doesn't look, you can't see the foil from the other side basically. So there's one. And this one's going to be a little trickier because it does have rounded edges and it's a little bit smaller, but same thing. Stick it. And with inward curves like this, I like to just take my finger and kind of roll it along. If it's not perfectly centered, you can unstick it and reposition it, but try not to do it too many times because you'll lose the stickiness on your tape. Something else you can do is if you get it all stuck down and you find that there's a little bit of weird overlap on one spot, you can take an X-Acto knife and cut the foil back so you can't see it from the other side. And the last little side here, take my foil, trim it. And pinch down all of the overhang. So when I'm making stained glass, this is the process I use to foil all of my pieces before I solder them together. This is essentially stained glass, but without any of the glass cutting or grinding or horrible mess that it makes. Rub the edges down. Rub all the sides. And something like this that has a lot of points, I'll go in and I'll press down each point just to make sure that little folded piece is really stuck, because that's where our jump rings are going to attach to. So we want to make sure that they are extra tight. So this So this is what the piece will look like when it's done, and it'll all be held together by chain and jump rings. So I am going to clean up and get my soldering mat over, and we will solder this bad boy together. Okay, so here is my soldering setup. I have my rubber, latex, non-latex gloves that I use. These are not heat resistant in any way. They're just to keep this, which is this, from getting on my hands. I have my heat resistant board. As you can see, it has been burnt and covered in flux a bunch. We have our 2 copper foiled bevels. I have my solder. This is my flux. I keep it in this little cup with a little brush. It's, I don't know, gross and old and should be replaced, but I don't feel like replacing it. I also have my jump rings right here. So my soldering iron is turned on. I have it set to like 725 degrees. You might want to play with it to get your settings just right. I tend to stay, I would suggest you start at about 700 and play around from there. And I realize these are sort of hard to see because they're clear, so I will do the best I can. So when using flux, you need very, very little of it. If you use too much, it's going to get underneath that copper foil and it's going to come loose. So what you're going to do is take your little brush, and you're going to brush all of your foiled spots. This flux will tell the solder where to go. So it'll only stick to copper foil that has flux on it. And make sure you get the outside edges and the back all around. This brush holds a lot of flux in it, so I don't really need to re-dip it or anything. I just do that. And you could definitely do this carefully without getting on your hands. I just don't like being that careful. So, okay, we're gonna start with this big diamond, and I am going to try to, let's see if I can move you a little bit closer. My goodness. Okay. So the technique we're going to be using to solder or put solder on this is called tinning, where you're not really getting a big bead of solder, you're just sort of putting an edge on it. So take your soldering iron. This is hot, so be very careful what you do with it. And I'm just going to touch it to the end of my solder, and it's going to get a little metal drip on it. And I am going to go along the edge. As you can see, it sticks. Get another little bead. If you are uncomfortable holding this, you can definitely do this with it on your work surface. Like I said, I'm used to doing this, so I will just hold them. This piece of glass will heat up, so you don't want to be picking it up and like moving it around or anything. Flip it over. Woo. And the reason I used silver back copper foil is because you will be able to see through the bevel and you'll see the underside of the foil. So I want it to match the outside, which is now covered in solder and is now silver. It sort of looks a little bit coppery on camera just because everything in my room is pink, so it's reflecting the pink, but it is, like when I look at it with my eyeballs, it's silver. Okay, so let's do the same thing with this one. Thing to note is that you're going to want to be careful not to hold your soldering iron on these too long, because if glass gets too hot, it will break. So now it's time for the hardest part of this project, which is attaching jump rings. If I can get my jump rings open. I'm going to use medium-sized rings. So I'm using that, I don't know if you can actually tell what size that is. That size jump ring. So it's not like the smallest one, but it's like smaller than like the normal packs you'd find at Michael's. So we're gonna be adding a jump ring to both sides of our diamond and two sides of our star. Take your flux, flux all your jump rings. You don't have to get too much on them, they'll sort of work it out. Take your tweezers or your pliers, hold them at the top. Take your soldering iron, get a little bead. You're just going to hold the jump ring against the tip and just dab the solder on. This is the hardest part of the project. So as you can see, there's just like a little dollop of solder right on that jump ring. Once it cools down, I'll go back, I'll get another little blob of solder and just dab again. And you just want to go touch, touch. Don't hold it because your jump ring will melt and fall off. Well, the jump ring will melt. The solder that you initially put on there will melt, and your jump ring will fall or get, you know, cattywampus or, you know, whatever. Check the front. If you have any weird lumps on the front of it that you can see that you don't like, you can just dab it with your soldering iron and it should level out without knocking your jump ring off. So I'm getting most of these on my first try, but sometimes with project it takes me like a lot of tries to get them on there. So if you have a hard time with it, do not feel bad. Again, other side of our little star, little dab, hold till it's solid. Dab, dab. Ooh. And that one turned out kind of crooked, which I don't like. So if that happens, all you have to do is hold that jump ring and touch your iron and it'll pop right off and you can try it again. And again, it did something weird. It filled the entire jump ring with solder. Ooh, focus. Focus. There you go. Grab the ring, hold your soldering iron until it pops up. And third time's always a charm. Let's try it. Okay, just gonna set these down, make sure they look okay, and they look good to me. So I am going to clear off my soldering stuff and show you how to clean and assemble these. Okay, time to clean. So we are going to pick out our jump rings. I think I like this size. Actually, I am going to use my teeny tiny jump rings. You can even see those. Because when I'm attaching chain to a jump ring that's already there, I like using these little tiny ones so you can't really see them as well. And I'm gonna see if I have any big jump rings left for the very top. So I'm gonna cut my chain for my top piece. And when I make things like this, I don't really measure, I just sort of eyeball it. So I cut this piece about 7 inches, but I might end up cutting it again. So take your pliers, open your jump ring, twist it to the side so you have a nice little, I don't know if you can really see that with those pliers. So it's twisted open to the side. So when you go to close it, all you have to do is twist it back as opposed to opening it like that, where then you'll have to push. So open jump ring. One end is going on the chain. One is going to our top bezel. And then just close the jump ring up. And we have the top piece of our little hanger. So I think I want a piece of chain to go between these two, but I want it to be very small. I'm gonna see if I have any scraps of chain since I've been cutting chain for a while. No, okay. I'll just cut a piece. So this ended up being about 2 inches. I'm gonna take my next little jump ring, find the opening at the top, twist, one in through the chain, one in through the bevel, and close. So now I'm just gonna do that and make sure that's a length I like. I think I want that to be a little bit shorter. I'm gonna cut it. I cut about 3/4 of an inch on there. So we have like 1 1/4 inches of chain left, plus any length the jump ring gives us, which is about 1/4 inch. So this is where it might get a little bit tricky. You'll want to make sure that your chain is completely straight before you attach the next piece. This is so both right sides of the bevels will face forward when it's hanging. And there we go. There's our little hanger. I am going to trim this top chain because I've decided I do not like it this long. And if you don't want to put a jump ring, you can definitely just put like a loop of string, or you could make a loop of chain, or whatever you would like. Since I have these big jump rings, it's just what I'm going to use. And there we go. I also would suggest getting, if you want to hang this in a window, a suction cup with a little hoop or a little hook on it. The trick to getting these to stay on your window is putting just a tiny bit of oil on the back of them, so it'll stick and it won't dry out. So you should go hang this in one of my windows, huh? Okay, that was my little crystal and beveled glass sun catcher tutorial DIY rainbow speckles all over your house. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel if you want to see more stuff like this. If you have suggestions on what you would like to see me make next, you can leave them in the comments below. And until next time, bye!